Hello, it's John Heaton and Happy New Year to everyone. First of all, back from England. I want to show you a few things I picked up in England, and also to say that I just received a copy in the post of this book from Terry Wilson, and I'm going to be reviewing that in my next video, but I'm only halfway through it, so I thought I'd finish it. I'm devouring it. I've already read nearly half of it. Superb stuff, but for this video I'm going to show you another book I picked up in England, not quite so monumental as that one, which is a book by Brian Southall. Came out in 2019. I picked this up in Oxfam relatively cheap, and basically this goes through the Beatles albums one by one, and it's quite interesting because it has some interesting people participating. For example, we've got Brian Southall, who edited it, who became marketing manager of EMI in 1974 up until 1989. So he masterminded some of the Beatles compilations which came out in the second half of the 70s and early 80s. And he's a little bit embarrassed by some of them because they didn't go down too well with the surviving Beatles, such as Rock and Roll Music, Love Songs, etc. But anyway, this book doesn't focus on those compilations, it just focuses on the albums. And what it does, what's interesting about it is, well, first of all, I'll tell you some of the people who contributed to the book. Chris Thomas, the famous record producer, Ken Townsend, who was an engineer at EMI. Who else have we got? Tom Robinson, the rock singer who had hits with 2468 Motorway and Sing If You're Glad to Be Gay. Graham Goldman, former lead singer of 10cc, or maybe current lead singer, I'm not sure if they're still going, but anyway, he was on all those great 70s albums with Eric Stewart. Ray Connolly, the journalist. Barbara Dixon, the singer. Tommy Bramwell from Apple. Steve Harley, the singer. Glenn Matlock, ex-Pistols. Tim Rice is also contributing. Giles Martin. And a guy called Tristan Fry, who played drums and percussions in the London Philharmonic Orchestra and was actually on Day in the Life, but couldn't remember that he was on it and didn't realise he was on it until the 90s. If you can believe that. He says he just went from session to session and he couldn't remember who he was playing for, which is kind of hard to believe, but anyway, I suppose we better give him the benefit of the doubt. What else? Well, basically the format of this book is it's got comments from those contributors, and what's quite interesting is a lot of them were buying the albums as they came out at the time, whereas, for example, I discovered it all retrospectively about 10-15 years after the original albums had come out. So, for example, Tom Robinson is raving about the early albums, and in particular Rubber Soul, and then said he was disappointed by Revolver, which is quite interesting. And then he's back to raving about Pepper, not so much the White Album, but it's interesting how people felt at the time. We've got the critics. What the critics said is another feature of each chapter, and we've got some rather embarrassing contributions. We've got Richard Green saying of Rubber Soul, he must be embarrassed by this, if recorded by anyone else but the Beatles, it would not be worthy of release. Just goes to show, even when the Beatles were at their peak, you still had idiots in the music press who are out to get them and saying ridiculous things like that. What else have we got? Yeah, there's a comment on the White Album as well, which is almost as hard to believe. Something about, maybe I can't find it, it's saying unbelievably boring. Half the songs are mediocrities or something like that. I know White Albums often come in for stick, but that comment was over the top, I thought. But anyway, some interesting pictures in here. We've got a very interesting picture taken at Cannes of the Wonderwall, taken at the time of the Wonderwall premiere. It's George and Ringo there with Jane Birkin, the lead actor from the film. And that was interesting. Also the actual album covers are not featured, I guess, for copyright reasons, but then this is a picture of John and George at London Airport just about to fly over to Maharishi, February 68. Very interesting. What else have we got? We've got a picture of, the White Album. This is the photo introducing the White Album chapter. George and John looking over the Ganges in the Himalayas. It's February 68 kind of time. And then we've got a picture from '68 of John and Paul with Yoko at the premiere of his own right, the play that Lennon's book, which was put on. That's a very interesting picture, seeing Yoko, John and Paul all friendly, no problems. So that was just a few pictures to show you. And what else have I written down in this? There's a few factual inaccuracies in this book. For example, at the chronology at the end, it says Paul McCartney announced the split of the Beatles January the 11th, 1970, when we all know it was April the 10th, 1970. And also there's a picture of Paul meeting with Linda at the Sgt. Pepper launch party in May '67, and the caption says Linda with her new boyfriend, but they weren't together at that first meeting. They didn't get together for quite a while after that. What else? Yeah, I don't want to pick too many holes. Oh, there's one letter to Lee Eastman telling him he's not responsible for the Beatles, and please forward any correspondence you have to Alan Klein. And the caption for that letter is, "This is the letter dismissing Alan Klein." So absolute opposite. But anyway, don't want to nitpick because it's quite an enjoyable book. As I say, I picked it up relatively cheap from Oxfam, and I learnt a few things, particularly about how people felt at the time about the albums, which is always interesting, because you know us second generation fans don't always get that aspect of it because we come to it years later. So that was a decent book I picked up. Now I want to show you some albums I picked up. This I got from, where did I get this from? Reckless Records in Berwick Street. This is a Mexican copy of Timepieces, the classic Eric Clapton compilation from '82, with all the titles there in Spanish. I always loved the cover, and I loved the track listing, and I got into this album probably before any other Eric Clapton album, so I was delighted to see a Mexican copy of that. This is a Japanese copy of Thank You for the Music, the Spanish version of Thank You for the Music, Gracias por la Música, and this has got, as you see, it's not only got the obby strip, it's got adverts for some Abba t-shirts, it's got the inner sleeve with the lyrics in English, Spanish, as well as Japanese, which is what all Japanese albums come with normally. It's normally the English and the Japanese, but in this case, because it's a Spanish language album, it's Spanish. And then beautiful red vinyl. Look at that. It's in very good condition. And it wasn't particularly cheap, but I'd never seen this album on black vinyl, let alone red vinyl, so I was very happy to pick that up. Then I picked up Christine McVie, the recent compilation album, which came out earlier this year, and unfortunately she died towards the end of the year, and this is very sad because there's even an interview with Christine from January of this year, and at the end the interviewer was saying, well, is this compilation going to make you come back in the studio and record more stuff? And Christine says, well, I never say never at the end, which is very sad. And she's also talking about George Hawkins, who had passed away and who no longer with us, and of course she would leave us as well later on in the same year, so that's very sad. Nice gatefold sleeve for this album, with some nice pictures, Christine there, and not too many. I was hoping for some sleeve notes from Glyn Johns, but there's nothing. But it's got the Who played on each track, and I was actually surprised to know that Slow Down was an old track from 1985, so pre-Tango in the Night, post the '84 solo album. And All You Got to Do I knew was an outtake from In the Meantime, so those are the two unreleased tracks. There is an orchestrated version of Songbird where the piano's been taken off and Glyn Johns has done some orchestration. I have to say, I don't particularly like it myself. Christine was very happy with it. Maybe a lot of people like it, but I just think that song without the piano is kind of loses something vital in my opinion. But anyway, it's just my opinion. Don't take it too seriously. And this is on lovely green coloured vinyl. So lovely to pick that up in London at FOP Records over the break. And particularly since we've lost Christine, I had to pick that up. So that was that. As I say, I'm going to do a detailed review of this stupendous book. It really is looking like it's going to be a reference, the reference book for the first 5 years of the solo Beatles. But more to come in my next video on that. Meantime, Happy New Year again, and thanks for watching. See you next time.